So we're in the fermentation room in the Crafty Brew Co, and we're joined by Peter. So Peter, you've over the last few years evolved quite a good little kombucha based company here in Northern Ireland. So what's that experience been like for you?
Oh wow, that's a big question to start with, but it's been fun, and it's been essentially a business that's grown out of a hobby.
Yeah.
And a business that's grown out of like sort of my personal desire or want or need for, you know, a good low and no alcohol or alcohol-free alternative.
Yeah.
And it's been a nice journey to try and deliver a product that, you know, that I'm proud of, that I wanted to drink. And of course I brewed for myself, just at home brewed for a number of years before I commercialized it. So that's the style of drink that I'm trying to create for other people, and hope that, you know, that if I like it, that somebody else is going to, you know, think the same.
Yeah. Like the reason we do these videos is to shine a light on local producers. We're really passionate about supporting local. So we're going to drop the link to the website below and socials and stuff, so that people can check out what you're doing. But we do it to give people an insight into how products are made, a little bit of a glimpse behind the scenes. So if someone's watching this for the first time, they've never tried kombucha before, can you describe it very briefly?
So, I mean, a lot of people, even kombucha brewers, I think, don't really realise that kombucha is a form of vinegar. It's a light vinegar, essentially. Yeah. The organic acids in it are essentially similar to what's in vinegar. Yeah. But tends to be lower concentration and slightly milder. So, you know, be prepared for a vinegariness, particularly in the smell. Kombucha is a drink that, you know, you don't really need to do an aroma test of. If you're taste testing it, you can skip the aroma side because it's going to be vinegar. And so, but after that, there's such a mixed bag, I guess, in terms of flavour profiles, you know, and or even strength of kombucha in terms of how long they're brewed. Yeah. But ultimately, you know, it shouldn't be, you know, a torturous process to drink, you know, a healthy drink. Right, you know, it should still be palatable. It should be clean and crisp and pretty refreshing, you know, and it's actually those organic acids in it that bring a lot of the health properties, and also bring a lot of the thirst quenching side to kombucha as well. So yeah, definitely, if you've got a sweet tooth, and I notice that, you know, at markets or fairs or whatever, people with sweet tooth are the ones who probably have, you know, a tougher job in hiding their their shock. But people who don't, and if they have a more savoury taste profile, you know, barely taste the vinegariness or the acidity at all. So yeah, it really depends on people's palate.
What is your background that led you into this, or is it just that you were just a passionate kombucha homebrewer?
So I'm actually you know, I guess a tea geek on one hand. So so the tea side and the botanical side really brought me into it. But my background is botany, actually, and agricultural botany, and have, you know, a degree and PhD from Queen's in plant science. Yeah. So I've worked in agri-food for actually over 20 years now, all in all, mostly in the primary production side, in support of agricultural production. So definitely the botanical side has been an interest, and I really love just the subtle variation in tea flavours and botanical ingredients, and actually the potential of plants and plant-based products, I guess, to give beneficial and helpful, you know, properties. So that's a real interest. And on the other hand, I've worked for nearly 10 years now in the fermentation industry as well, and in that case much bigger scale, but fermenting for biofuels. Yeah. So I've been a consultant on that side for all that time, actually. So this is like the perfect storm of a hobby almost that combines all those things, and lets me sort of play around with fermentation and botanicals and you know, and everything that goes with it.
For me, I homebrew kombucha at home. We were chatting about this earlier. So I have like a little Kilner jar with a tap in the bottom of it. I maybe cheat a little bit in that I use it as a way of exploring how botanicals and teas blend. Maybe tweak it a little bit for brewing a new batch of beer, approaching it in that way. But I buy a SCOBY, or have bought a SCOBY in the past, and I've put the SCOBY into a sugary tea solution, usually with, I would add a botanical or some sort of fruit or something to give it a different flavour dimension. If you don't have a SCOBY at home, it's still possible to make kombucha from scratch, isn't it?
Not really. So ultimately, a SCOBY is a symbiotic culture of bacteria and yeast. So ultimately, you need both the bacteria and the yeast.
Yeah.
And if they're not present, it's not going to work. So really, the only way to do it is to bring a starter culture of some form together. Now, there is a misconception that the SCOBY is the disc, the gelatinous disc, which is a cellulose disc that forms on top. So that's not purely essential to use that disc. So if you can get any good live raw kombucha from a can, like any of our cans will operate as a starter.
Yeah.
They wouldn't be as good as a dedicated starter that would be, stronger and able to start your kombucha quicker and more robustly. But so you do need that element. It's like sourdough bread or any other fermented. Yeah, you need to start with, and probably the better, more healthy the culture is, then the more success you're going to have. It's very important to get the pH right at the beginning, and your dosage of starter, your amount of starter liquid at the beginning will have to dictate that, So,
what sugar content should someone be aiming for at home if they're making, like, I'll use a 5 litre batch because I know that's the sort of size I would work on. So if you're making your tea solution and about to add your starter, whether that be a SCOBY disc that's bought, or whether somebody uses one of your cans, or whether they knock the door of the warehouse here and say, here, can I have a little vial to get me going? What sort of sugar content should they be looking at? So
typically you can brew from about 50 grams to 100 grams per litre of final product. We commercially we tend to stay on the lower side of that, but I've brewed with all within that variation. And I know some of maybe restaurants, I know that Noma's book, for example, their brews in it are really strong. They're over 100 grams per litre. But I prefer to, and I think our culture's become adapted to a much lower sugar content. And certainly if you want a can of product and you want some shelf life, you don't want a lot of excess sugars and things floating about there, and we're not trying to create a sugary drink either, so we would be closer to 50 grams per litre.
You'd mentioned there, like, Noma's book. I think it's a phenomenal book for sort of getting you inspired to try new things. Is there anything that you've tried hasn't worked, or is there anything, if someone's watching this, you'd steer them towards trying as a flavouring?
No, I wouldn't say rule out anything. I mean, I think definitely, like, the company, even how we do things now, although we're really striving for consistency and things like that, experimentation is key to a lot of it, and sort of have fun with it. I think in terms of difficult ingredients, spices can be difficult. In terms of, potentially things like cloves, for example, which have antibacterial effect, can interfere with the process. Now, we found that our process keeps going through that, but still spices tend to go in various directions from a taste profile point of view. So that's probably one thing. You can either hit or miss with those and get a good response. We tend to also put a lot of, nearly all of our flavouring in terms of whole fruits and spices or whatever in at the beginning of the process. In the primary, and rather than maybe some brewers would put that in towards the end and really treat it as a flavouring at the end, whereas we treat it as, essentially, if we say we use raspberries in one of our popular recipes, that goes in right at the start. So the raspberries themselves become a form of sugar, a form of energy for the bug. So we'll actually reduce our sugar content in that case to account for the sugars in the raspberries. So it's good also to experiment with getting those things in at the beginning. It can be problematic for your SCOBY going forward if you want to reuse that starter then for something else. But No, I would say experiment with everything, and I think one of the things we always get really strong, vigorous fermentation with is ginger, you know, and nearly everybody who's produced kombucha will use a ginger, have a ginger flavour at some stage. So definitely that's a strong, you know, a strong ingredient. I guess one other thing I'd add is don't forget to vary your teas as well, because like, you know, we're sort of tea people here and like specialty tea, and so there's definitely a lot to be gained from, you know, varying tea types. Yeah. And, you know, again, it's very hard to second guess whether what brews as a nice tea to drink, you know, translates into a nice kombucha, you know, and we've got lots of variation here. So certainly there's lots of different types of teas, black teas, oolongs, and forms of green teas and things that shouldn't be overlooked either.
If you, it's moving quite nicely on the next question there, you're saying, you know, tea. So does the temperature the tea is made at have an impact, and time? So temperature and time will be the next thing you'll try and get a bit of info on. And that's temperature in relation to the tea being produced, then the fermentation temperature and the time, contact time, length of time from, you know, take us through that. Yeah.
So there's loads of questions there, but in terms of the initial brew, so as part of our standard recipes, we will have set, you know, amount of tea that we use per finished litre, and we'll also have specific brew temperature for that, so we consider it to be important, and we will have a set brew time for that as well. So we try to maintain exactly the same type of infusion each and every time for our commercial batches, because particularly things like black teas, and we've one black tea kombucha, Samson and Goliath, in our core range, and very easy to brew it out and get very tannin flavours, you know, and that's where you get a lot of astringency and things like that, and that actual recipe, before we really nailed it down, you could brew it into like a really clean, crisp, biscuity type of finish, versus a more, I would describe it as a sort of plummy, chutney sort of finish, you know, and to me a lot of that came from inconsistency and brew temperature and brew time. So those things definitely are important, and obviously then ultimately, so that's your sweet tea brewing, and then you brew your fermentation, and there's a time and a temperature associated with that as well. So you can brew kombucha anything from I would say 20-21 degrees is your minimum point, up to probably 28, 29. And if you're going for a set end point, then the higher the temperature, you ultimately get there slightly quicker, but not necessarily better, because the flavours change, and you know, you can tend to favour yeast at higher temperatures rather than the bacteria, and the associated, you know, interaction of flavour profiles with that. So so all of those things are important, and again, we experiment a lot, but on the core commercial production lines, everything is very consistent.
Just to finalise on temperature and time, from you start the process until finished kombucha, roughly, now, and obviously if you follow those consistent temperatures, roughly how long are we talking from start to finish?
So the majority of our brews is a 6-week process, so generally fermentation is 4 weeks, and then we aim to cold crash, try and take out some of the yeast and other sediment, and condition then after that in a dedicated conditioning tank, and we'd like a minimum of a week for each of those, but it actually does better if it gets more than that, you know. So and you know, in smaller vessels, home brew vessels, even some of the earlier smaller 25-35 litre vessels, you could probably, you know, do your primary fermentation in 2 weeks, you know, or just over 2 weeks. But sort of with a bigger vessel we're using now, and you know, we're keeping a relatively low temperature, it's pretty much taken exactly 4 weeks to hit the end point of where we want.
Where can people find your lovely kombucha is the next thing. So if somebody's watching this, how do they get their hands on it? Is there mail order?
So there's mail order. So I guess that's the best and easiest way to find it, is come directly to the website.
That goes direct in your pocket.
And it does, it's important.
Yeah.
But also we probably, it's where you have the consumer has the best choice of flavour as well. So every flavour, if it's available, it's there.
Yeah.
And it may be that there's short runs and specials and things like that. So, and we like to interact with, and we'd like to grow our interaction with our consumer base as well, So after that, we're really trying hard to increase our retail offering. We're also trying to increase our, our presence in some of the on-trade, sort of the conventional licensed, places as well, bars, restaurants, and we are in a number of those, but we think there's a good demand for kombucha now, and a lot of good bars and restaurants and bartenders and mixologists are looking for kombucha.
Yeah, it pairs very well with our gin. I've noticed that.
Yeah.
At a few festivals. Look, just to wrap up, really good local business here in Northern Ireland, and I love what they're doing. We've worked with you from a very early stage, supplying stainless steel tanks that have now turned into looking after the Muller culture. So look, it's two people running this business here, very much independent, very much in need of local support. So please reach out, check them out on the website, follow them on socials, and until next time, happy brewing.